And today's reading is from Philippians 2, verse 1 through 4. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in his spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. That is the word of the Lord. Y'all can take a seat.
Today, I want to just continue to talk about this invitation into a road to joy. A road to joy that I believe that every year as we come towards Advent and as we come towards the celebration of Christmas, and really what Christmas is simply the cultural celebration of the deepest distinction and sacred mystery of our faith, that God, Emmanuel, came to be with us. And the incarnation is at the center point of the salvation story. And it is for us such a deep place of conviction that every year we come back to these places and remind ourselves of the very witness of what the incarnation and the coming of Christ means for us as followers of Jesus. And in this season, what we see and understand is that there is an invitation into a life of joy. And even the central picture of the announcement of the coming of Jesus by the angelic realm was a good news with great joy. And I believe that not only is this distinct moment or this season an invitation into joy, but we are living in moments where the desperate need to understand true joy is among us. As I shared last week, if we cannot navigate the differences between life pursuing joy and a life pursuing happiness, we will be doomed to the lesser conclusion of the two. And the problem is that the lesser conclusion of the two cannot deliver on either. And not only will it not lead to a life void of joy and happiness, but it will deform us in the process. Because the invitation of joy is the countercultural, upside-down kingdom of Jesus. It is not in the places you would first expect it. And if we cannot, as followers of Jesus, begin to learn to walk the road of joy, not only will it be missing in our own lives, but the witness it's meant to bear, the vision it's meant to send, the invitation it alone can carry, will be robbed from the neighbors around us. Hebrews has this passage, right? It's one of the more famous verses in the Bible, Hebrews 12, 1 through 2. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. I mean, there's so much in this passage we're not looking at this morning. This is just filled with so much invitation and beauty, but I want you to just be reminded of this simple verse. That as the author of Hebrews is navigating the reality of what Jesus has done for us, and he tells us something about the character and the nature of Jesus, and he says, for the joy set before him, Jesus walked into not only the most profound physical suffering that a human being could experience, but he carried the very spiritual nature of the totality of sin and death. And for the joy that was set before him, he did this. And the author of Hebrews is clear. The joy that set before Jesus wasn't that eventually the torment would end. The joy that was set before Jesus wasn't that in his death, he would be woken back up to life and would one day ascend back to the Father. The joy wasn't even in the fact that one day Jesus would be the victor fully over death, and the last enemy to fall would be death itself, all true as those things are. There was one joy set in front of Jesus, and it was reuniting you with his Father. The joy that was set in front of Jesus that could look at the cross and move towards it was you. And it begins to lead us into the most peculiar possibility. And that joy is found in the most unexpected places. And that it begins to define ultimately why we so commonly miss joy itself. Because joy is intertwined and fundamentally connected to the giving away of yourself for someone else. In fact, I would tell you that joy lives exclusively in that place. And I believe this is part of the reason we are a people of such deficit in joy, because we've learned to live lives that so ultimately revolve around ourselves. We struggle to ever enter into the place where true joy exists. See, happiness is the realm of self. Joy is the realm of others. And unless we allow God to free us from the enslavement of longing day after day after day for the simplicity of what it looks like to make ourselves happy, we'll never be able to be liberated into the radical truth about joy. Let me tell you one quick story. I remember when I was younger, this was, I think, roughly 14-ish years ago now, that my wife and I, Emily, were living in Seattle. We were youth and college pastors at the time. And this was the first season where I began to have opportunities to travel and speak like I'm doing this week. And I was teaching at a missions base in Montana. In fact, it was the same missions organization that I had become a part of that radically changed my life, where I was discipled and sent, and the first season of where I lived as a missionary came from. And so the opportunity to go back and teach was just such an honor and a privilege for me. In fact, it always is. But it was here that I was teaching, and it's common when you teach somewhere that at times you'll be given an honorarium. And while that is not the motivating factor of why you should go and teach anywhere, if you ever get the opportunity to, one thing you're aware of when you teach at missions bases is it's not going to be very much, no matter what it is, right? And so you're not there for the finances. My point is that while that should always be true, that is a reality. But it was here that I remember I had come, and they actually mentioned wanting to give me a larger honorarium than normal, which I was caught off guard by. And I had these, they reimbursed me for a handful of things. I had driven over. It's about, I know you're not familiar with the Northwest. Seattle to Lakeside, Montana is about a 7-hour drive, and it's beautiful. And go fast. You go real fast. This was back when Montana didn't have speed limits. Did you know that? Well, there was a time when Montana dropped the speed limit like Germany, and then they realized Americans are not trustworthy with such power. But I drove that road going 105, 110 many times. Yeah, I was not wise. This was pre-salvation Phil, right? But I was driving, I drove over, and during that week, I had the honor of meeting like this remarkable man of God. His name was Bal, spelled B-A-L. And he had just arrived in Montana as a refugee from Bhutan and Nepal. He'd kind of lived in both nations. And he had experienced profound persecution. He had been jailed for many, many years of his life. He was jailed as a teenager at 14 for refusing to walk away from the gospel. Started underground churches, started an underground Bible college. And in this last season, part of the intensity that was coming towards him and his family, his community, he was actually had the opportunity to become a refugee to the United States and was settling with some shared friends in Montana. And we had lunch together, and it was remarkable. And in that moment, I felt the Holy Spirit in a very distinct way tell me to give about $600 of my honorarium, which at the time I actually thought, well, that's going to be more than my honorarium, God. But I was in, and I was overwhelmed by this remarkable man. But as the week went on, I started to have other thoughts. I thought about a bill I owed that I had forgotten about. I thought about a date I wanted to take Emily on. And I was a youth pastor. Emily wasn't working. Funds were extremely limited. And piece by piece by piece, my heart of generosity began to slip away. All with deep justification There were real things that I had forgotten about, real uses for this unexpected gift that I was about to receive. I remember at the end I remember this distinctly because of the story I'm about to tell you. I got this check for $837.19. And it was a random number because of receipts that they had reimbursed for driving and different things. And I had this strange thought that I never did this, but I was like, I'll just cash this check at the bank before I leave and pay cash all the way home for gas. And I never thought like that. It was a season where I had all of these reimbursements. This weird part of the life of a pastor. Often all of the ministry you lead, you're paying for on your own credit card until you get it reimbursed. And as a youth pastor, I was less organized in those days. I was like, I don't want more. So this is what I'll do. But it was strange to me now that I look back because I'd never done that before. I'd never had that thought, never done anything like that. When it was actually so much more complicated than just using your credit card. But I remember I go to the bank and I'm about to go home and I need to get home and I turn in the check and sweet lady's talking back and forth. And she gives me the money laid out and she goes, here is your $237.19. I go, what? I go, what did you say? I mean, it really caught me off guard. She goes, well, here's your $237.19. And I begin to say, no, that's actually, and I look down and I clearly see $837.19. And then suddenly the fear of God filled my heart in that bank. And I was like, okay, Jesus, I hear you. I'm really sorry. I hear you. It was one of the strangest moments of engagement with God in this way that I had ever had. I mean, audibly hearing her tell me an amount minus the amount God had called me to give. So I remember going, and I really did. At this point, I did not know where he lived. Our meal was at a shared place, a small town as it was. I did not know how to find him. I did not have his phone number. This is, quite a while ago when the world's not quite as interconnected through technology. And I had to get back, and I was already running late, thus my fast driving. I had to get back to Seattle. I remember telling the Lord, I was like, Lord, I repent. You asked me to do this. I failed, and I wrestled with my own heart, and I don't know what to do, and I have to drive home. If I'm going to do this, I need you to bring Val to me. So what I said to him, and I go, Lord, I need you. Please cover me in this. I'm sorry. There was a real repentance that was growing in my heart. And I remember I drove from the bank right across the street to this tiny little gas station, and I'm filling up my car with gas, and suddenly I see Bal and his family walking alongside the street to the lakeside that existed right there. And I remember I ran up to Bal, and I had from the bank, I had this envelope, and I just put it in his hand. And I said, Val, the Lord he has you. This season, I know it's been so hard. You're just an incredible man of God. And I just want to bless you as you're doing this. And he tried to give it back to me. I'm like, I will not touch this money. You can leave it on the ground, but believe me and Jesus have gotten pretty clear. I'm not being generous. I was like, this looks like me being generous. I'm not. I have to do this. And I gave it to him, and it was just this sweet moment. To follow Jesus like he followed Jesus. I'm so sad that I was even needed the help of God. I got in my car and I began to drive back, and I had the most profound experience. I've never had one like it. As I'm driving back, suddenly the presence of God filled my car, and I began to experience euphoric joy. In my body, I remember calling Emily, my body, I was laughing and crying and singing and driving the speed limit as I was in alignment with the Lord. And it was not, literally, it lasted. I don't have a lot of experience with this, but it was drug-like. It was overwhelming to me. I was consumed with the presence of joy, and I did not know what was happening. I actually pulled over multiple times. It was something powerful that has never replicated myself was happening. I remember as I was getting close to pulling into my house 7-ish hours later, and I heard the Lord, and he began to speak to me about this war in my heart. And he just said, Phil, I want you to know that I'm trying to show you something, that the feeling that you've had of joy is actually the feeling of my own heart when you step into radical love for others. And you will not always feel this. And there is this invitation of who you are going to choose to be. And it was really one of the most sacred moments of my life where I felt the Lord telling me, you will either be a man who hoards everything he takes in for himself, or you will be somebody who learns how to live a life that trusts me and gives away what comes into your world. Because there's only one real path to joy. And you're going to have to make a decision. And I learned something in that moment that forever shaped my life, which was the realization that the road to joy is something you have to go to war for. Because the road to joy lives in the place of radical selflessness towards others for no self-benefit. Because you trust God for your future and for the lacking of whatever the generosity of what you've given, your time, your heart, your mind, your emotions, your money, whatever is the nature of your generosity, it is an entrusting of who you are to Jesus. I've learned this, that true selflessness can never actually begin until you trust how deeply you're loved, first and foremost, by God. I can't be selfless to earn him. I can't be selfless to somehow make myself look better. I can't be selfless to get something in return. That it is only in the place where I can stand and go, I know who I am, and I know how radically loved by God I am. So I can give away, and I can move into this place of selflessness because I trust the one who is caring for me. And this is something that will never happen by accident. Let me say this to you so clearly. Joy is never something you accidentally find. You have to go to war for it. Because while happiness lives in the realm of you, joy lives in the realm of others. And unless you contend with all of the broken pieces of your heart that want to not only keep finances, it's just an example, but really put these walls of fear and self-protection around your life. We are living as followers of Jesus, and we have traded in the joy of heaven for the cheapness of happiness. But I'm telling you, the road to joy is clear. And if we begin to walk it, not only will we watch the radical nature of Jesus shape and change us, not only will we watch the radical beauty of Jesus change and transform the lives of others, you will find joy. And guys, I've learned this. While I share a single story that was so unique, what has not become unique is that the greatest delights in my life have nothing to do with me. And have everything to do with the people that I love. My wife, first and foremost, my 4 kids. But more than that, the people that God has placed next to me and around me. Because joy in understanding its attachment to others actually becomes not only the pathway for joy, but for Christ-likeness. And this passage that David read, Dave, it's weird to call you David wherever you are, Dave. You're Dave for sure. Philippians 2 says this, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in his spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one of mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. I've taught Philippians 2 many times. It's this passage about the radical selflessness of Jesus. As Paul continues in this passage, Jesus, who his equality with God was not something he grasped to use for his own advantage, but he emptied himself, becoming a slave into the likeness of humanity and bore the cross for us. And it is here that now he has received the name above every name, the name of Yahweh himself. And at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, for he is Lord and God. The God co-eternal, co-equal with the Father, emptied himself, became entrusted into this rescue mission of salvation, walked through everything we walked through, not just simply in the reality of his godhood, but he emptied himself. He experienced every temptation we experienced. He walked through every aspect of human life, and he walked through it in wholeness and in perfection, dying for us on the cross, ultimately raising into eternal life, now defeating the enemies of sin and death and inviting any man, any woman who longs to yield to him into salvation life forever. This is the message of Jesus, that rescue came through selflessness. And Paul's looking at a church in Philippi saying, I'm telling you, there is something that God is trying to do in you through the way Jesus simply is. Could you imagine the God of this world who spoke all things into creation does not think his godness is something he should use as his own advantage over you? The God of all things is humble, selfless. Do you know the scriptures say that Jesus, when he endured every amount of temptation that we did and didn't fail to it, what it provoked inside of him was tenderness of heart? It says that he has mercy for you. His lack of failure in any other human being would make him arrogant and better than you. But Jesus, who doesn't fail when we fail, has it provoke greater mercy for us. Guys, it's unfathomable. And we see this radical invitation that exists in Jesus to a life of joy. And Matt, you can come up. But in this passage, what caught my attention in a way that it has never caught my attention before is the simplicity of Paul's little line. Make my joy complete. And it reveals, if you're careful, if you'll slow down and let it speak to you, it reveals two things that are actually quite powerful. The first is this. Paul understands that his joy is permanently attached to those that he loves. Joy, Paul's exempling something for us. Think about it. Paul's in jail, by the way. Paul's suffering quite a bit. He doesn't say, hey, make my joy complete by getting me out of here. Make my joy complete by, can you send another one of these gifts? Make my joy complete by, could you just keep sending food because they don't let me out to go buy my own, and if people don't provide it for me, I'll actually starve to death. It's kind of how Romans dealt with their judicial system, trying to kill as many people before they actually had to go to court as possible. And Paul's like, would you make my joy complete by loving each other? His joy was not attached to himself. It was attached to them. Something so subtle you'll miss it, but he's saying, in my life, this is where my joy comes from. It comes from you. It comes from this life lived with you and for you. And it tells us something about the road to joy that we miss. We live these micro individual lives so consumed with ourselves. No wonder we never find it. Always obsessed with our own happiness. What decision's gonna make me happy? What decision's gonna make my wife happy? What decision's gonna make my kids happy? What decision is ultimately the best thing for me today? Never really getting to the place where joy lives. Oh man, could you imagine? But it also leads us to this other wild conclusion. That Paul's saying, my joy is, which is attached to you, only comes to wholeness when you do what I'm trying to do for you, which all I'm trying to do for you is what Jesus did for me. Oh, you can make my joy complete by what? By having the same mind. You can make my joy complete by just don't think of yourself as highly as you do. Like just learn to pull down a little bit. You can make my joy complete by giving away your life to someone else. Like he's saying, make my joy complete by walking the road to joy with me. Oh, if you want to know what would make me really joyful, this is what Paul's saying. It would be to not have to walk the road to joy alone. Would you walk it with me? Listen to these invitations. This is where I'm going to end. He says, be like-minded. Make my joy complete by being like-minded. Same love, one spirit. It's a vision of unity. See, what Paul's saying is that the road to joy is found in laying down your preferences for the belonging of unity. I want you to see there's these three images that get created. Joy is in making room. If you want to make room for someone else, you have to pull back on yourself. Automatically, every single room, relationship, scenario you walk in, you fill to the fullest extent with yourself. Unity is the practice of pulling yourself back, preferring somebody else and making room for them in the room. Do you know that joy is in making room? It's in making room. Listen to what Paul says. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. What a picture that joy is in selflessness. That the road to joy is found in putting others above yourself to see them come fully alive. So not only is joy in making room, joy is in getting under. Oh, guys, we live in a culture that says, have you seen me? Have you loved me? Have you honored me? Have you promoted me? Have you ultimately made me feel as valuable as I believe I am? And Jesus is like, well, funny enough, joy is different than that. I mean, have you thought all this Christmas, who can I get under? Who can I serve above myself? Who can I make more important than me? What a radical way of living. And lastly, right, Paul says, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. It's a vision of care. So the road to joy is found in compassion for the needs of others, even when you have needs yourself. So joy is not just in the making room. Joy is not just in the getting under. Joy is in the giving away. This is the road to joy. It is a life that sees others, a life that loves others, a life that lives for the good of others. What would it look like in your life to go, would you make my joy complete by walking the road to joy with me? What would it look like to begin to make room for someone else by dying to yourself? Intentional decisions to lay down your preferences, to lift up and make belonging with somebody else. What would it look like this Christmas to not be convinced and consumed with what you think you deserve, but to actually recognize you deserve nothing? What do you deserve? What do you deserve? When you begin to see that we've received more than we could ever deserve, then we can start to be radically selfless by getting under others. And may it be this Christmas that we just find the true joy in the giving away of our heart, of our time. Because I'm telling you, just like Jesus, there's a joy set before you too. It's found in the people sitting next to you and the neighbors around you and the cubicles and the emails and the Zoom calls. There's a joy set before you. Have you found it? Joy is found in radical love for others. It will never be found in the pursuit of self. And I believe if we could find that, it would change and transform our lives. Come on, would you stand? I want to pray. I've already gone too far over. Prayer teams, would you come forward? Friends, if I can pray for you in any way, I would love the chance to do that. Our team wants to pray for you. If not, just have a remarkable rest of your day. Listen, may God bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you. May he turn his countenance to you And may you know everywhere you go this week, you are radically loved by Jesus. God bless you, friends. Have an incredible rest of your day. Merry Christmas. And I'm excited to see you next week.